Let's bring in Kerry Chikarovski and Bruce Hawker. Kerry, first to you. I know the government's had some difficult times in this term. Losing the referendum is one, but in terms of parliamentary weeks, this has been the worst that I've seen for the Albanese Labor government. They've had a shocker on a few different fronts.
Yeah, they certainly have, Kieran. I think that the whole releasing people from the detention centres has been a horrendous week for them. And look, I think I just listened to Dan Tehan, and I don't always support my coalition colleagues. I sometimes disagree, but on this one I've got to agree that I'm surprised, really surprised, that the government wasn't prepared for this decision. I know that you can always say, well, you can't predict what the High Court is going to do, but the reality is that this is one of those situations where you would have had scenario planning, and you would have had it 6 months ago, because you would have actually said to the department, what if, what can we do if these are the things that happen? So exactly. It is a little bit sad that the government has had to react to this as quickly as it has. I do actually say congratulations to the government for actually realising it had to react quickly, and also congratulations to Richard Marles for actually agreeing to the coalition amendments, because from what I've read, they will strengthen this legislation in a way which the public would expect it to be strengthened.
Yeah, Bruce, before we get to the infrastructure spend, because that's always a political bomb, especially when you're taking money from the states, we'll get to that in a moment, but just on this immigration issue that Kerry touches on, you know as well as I do, you've been around politics long enough to know security and economy. Security and economy. You've got to make sure you nail both, and they've bungled one in a big way this week and really played to Peter Dutton's strength.
Well, I think in this case of the visa issue, Kieran, it demonstrates actually that the Parliament can work together and work together efficiently, effectively and speedily when it needs to. And I think both parties have come together and come up with a package which will go a long way towards making sure that anybody who does pose a threat to the community is going to be under very close and constant surveillance, including I think the use of ankle bracelets and other mechanisms by which they can be tracked. So it's always convenient to get very upset and excited about this and agitate about it. But when you look at the reality behind this thing, I think we can accept that the government and the opposition helping it have got the thing pretty much under control at the moment. The rest will be largely point scoring, I think.
Point scoring at the state level, Kerry Chikarovski, you know state politics better than most, and seeing Labor governments push back so forcefully, you'd really hope that this is going to give them some other return, because politically, it looks like a misstep from the federal government, certainly the way they've announced it.
Well, I thought it was interesting that Anthony Albanese was cheering on the fact that he had all those Labor premiers around the country who would be there to support him. Well, not so much today. The Labor premiers and the Labor treasurers have certainly taken a bat to the federal government today, and rightly so, particularly in relation to some of those projects. I mean, for example, the interchange near the new airport, that's a significant piece of infrastructure, a critical piece of infrastructure for a number of reasons, one of which will be to make sure that not only can passengers get in and out of that airport promptly, but also that you've got free cargo moving in and out of the airport, that you've got the trucks able to access it. So I'm thinking that if they're scrapping that interchange, that's a really, really big decision, and I'm not surprised that Treasurer Mookie is pushing back on on that decision in particular and on others. But it was interesting to see so many of the Labor treasurers and transport ministers all saying, "Oh, what are you doing to us?" So yeah, honeymoon might be over. Yeah, absolutely.
Bruce, Queensland, WA, some key political battlegrounds. You don't really want to have fights, do you?
Well, I think it was probably in the government's interest to get this thing out in one day rather than seeing it dribble out over a period of weeks, and that certainly happened. We've got to remember, by the way, that one of the big challenges for the federal government is to try to keep inflation under control, and they've been warned by international bodies that means also keeping the infrastructure spend within manageable levels. So it's one of those cases where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. we should also remember that not all these projects are being scrapped by any stretch of the imagination, and some are being being suggested in their place as well, from what I can read from the reports today. So there's a case of swings and roundabouts for some of them. I think it was inevitable that the federal government would make this announcement without much forward briefing to the state governments, because the temptation to get out ahead of the federal government, put their own spin on things, would have been too much for any self-respecting treasurer in any government of any political persuasion.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons, I think, why we're seeing it come out in the way in which it has today.
But can I just make a quick
Bruce,
comment?
Kerry, great to see you. I'm sorry, Kerry, we've got to wrap it.
That's
We're going to
all right,
go.
no
We'll see you
problem.
next week.